me go ahead and record this. So classroom expectations, while you guys in here, you're gonna wear your mask, right? You're gonna wear your mask, you're gonna stay nice and distance from each other. When we share any equipment, if that ever is something that we do, I'll make sure to have hand sanitizer for y'all, okay? Every day you need to make sure to have your laptop, your charger, headphones, and hand sanitizer. Just it'll make it that much easier. We are going to try to do labs. Science without labs is not very fun, in my opinion. And it's going to take a lot more work on my behalf, but I want to make it happen. So more than likely, our labs will be kind of on a rotation for you guys. So, half of you guys would.
Teachers, please place your trash cans outside in the hallway.
Half of you guys would have your lab on Monday, and then the other half of you guys would have your lab on Thursday, right? And so while half of you guys are doing your lab, maybe the other half is working on a pre-lab or a post-lab, depending on our scheduling. But I do want to make labs happen. And I also want to utilize the school garden again with that same mentality, right? So there'll be like half of you guys might be working in the garden one day, and the other half might be in here. Because, there's there's 13 of us, I think, in here. So that would be 6 people outside. And I think you guys would be able to spread out very easily, okay? As I had mentioned in the prior Zooms, most of everything is still going to continue to be delivered and graded and shared with you guys via Google Classroom, okay? And we'll talk about some troubleshooting, how to make it better, how to make it easier, whatever we need to do here shortly. Okay, so the first thing I want to do today, and is everyone on the screen? I'm going to share my screen with you guys. I want to go over our checklist for the week, okay? And so here we are on our first day of school. You guys hopefully have seen the school video. If not, I'll send a link out. My classroom expectations, you guys know, not messing around with the masks. We're going to go over our quiz, and then you guys will start working on your vocabulary. Let's take a look at the week. It kind of worked out perfectly that we're back in person at least 2 days a week this week for respiration. Because cellular respiration, I don't know if you guys have looked ahead at all. It's, I think, a little bit more challenging than photosynthesis, right? And so if you thought photosynthesis really gave you a run for your money, then you're going to want to make sure to buckle down and not get behind this week. Okay, now what I would really suggest, being that you guys are A-Day people, is that you need to make sure that you're as prepared as possible for Thursday. Because Thursday, we'll be back together, and in my opinion, there's no better day to get help with something than when we're right here in the same classroom. Because you and I can have a full-on conversation. And you guys might all show up on Thursday and say, Collins, we watched the videos, and as a class, we're collectively lost, right? And then I could do a little mini review lecture or lesson, right? And get everyone caught up. So you're gonna wanna make sure to take advantage of this in-person setting. We're always gonna have a bazillion people showing up late. Better late than never, though. All right. So tomorrow, while you guys are at home, you'll still join the Zoom at the same time. We'll have some warm-up questions they'll start every Zoom off with, and you'll make sure to finish your vocab. And you guys, since you'll be at home, will continue to chip away at the respiration videos. And I've all posted those today under a separate tab, under materials. Wednesday, asynchronous, you guys will turn in your vocab. And I would, especially for you guys being A-Day, make sure on Wednesday you get through all of the respiration videos, or as far through it as possible. That way when you come on Thursday, you can have all your questions addressed, right? And let's say hypothetically you get through all the videos on respiration and even your notes for respiration, and you show up with all that done on Thursday. You ask a couple questions, you get it clarified. Then Thursday, you could spend the class period working on your article and your video questions. Okay, we have an article this week about the oldest enzyme and a video about fermented foods and the evolutionary development of our tastes, our taste buds, our sense of taste. And then Friday, we're going to have a quiz review, and we will have some warm-up questions that will prepare you for the quiz. And then Friday, we'll have a quiz on cellular respiration. Now, I've thought long and hard about this. What I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to alternate the days we take quizzes, right? So that way it's fair. Because I think, I don't know about you guys, I would probably feel more comfortable taking a quiz at home, just because like a quiet, like controlled environment. Whereas like here, you have like the pressure of time. You know, here, if you took the quiz, you only have 90 minutes to take it. Whereas at home, if you wanted to spend 4 hours doing it, you could, right? So I'm going to keep quizzes with that same like 12:01 to 11:59 p.m., right? Stretch. Now, to make it fair, I'll probably alternate between Fridays and Mondays, right? Or Fridays and Thursdays. That way, you're not always the one taking quizzes at home, and the other students are taking it here at school. Okay. And so all my assignments, the due dates will still be 11:59 p.m. So that gives you a lot of flexibility. And then you'll turn in your articles and your videos on Friday. And as always, your weekly work log. Don't forget your notes are due this week. Okay. And so I think a lot of people, when I assign the notes for the first week, they think, oh, is it due? And I tell them no. And I think it slips their mind, right? Don't forget your notes are due this week, this Friday. And guys, that late penalty, that's 10 points a day. That is really hurting some of y'all. Some of you guys are turning in great work, but it's like 4 or 5 days later, right? And so you would have made it 100, but it's a week late, right? And you really got to get on that. And the reason I'm trying to be strict with that is because if you fall behind, you're going to be in some serious trouble. I've got some students that, you know, are missing more than half of their assignments right now. And so if you think about how much work you've done over the last 4 weeks, they've got to try to get all that done this week. And in addition to what we're doing, right? So you don't fall behind. If you ever have any trouble staying on top of things, or you know, a week where it's just really bad and you're really overwhelmed, send me a message, ask for help, ask for extensions, right? Think about if, you know, I were your employer and I said, hey, I need you to get this done by tomorrow. If you didn't think like later that day you're trying to get it done and you don't think you're going to get it done time, are you just not going to tell your boss? Like, you know, think about the boss shows up the next day and then asks you to get something done. You didn't even say, hey, boss, I'm sorry, I didn't get done. And they show up expecting it to be done. And it's not done, right? Your boss or your coworkers, your friends, your family, everybody would be way happier if you were just like, hey, I can't get that done tonight, right? And I'm going to say, okay, that's great. When can you get it done? Right? And I'll work with you. Now, if that's every single assignment, then that can be a problem, right? All right. So let's go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second so I can pull up this quiz without flaunting y'all's grades in front of each other. And by the way, some of you guys did amazing on this quiz. Photosynthesis is no joke. And I was quite impressed with some of y'all's grades. And I'll pull that up here in just a second. How's your school day been going so far? Yeah, pretty good. All right, where are we at? Second period. You guys are all so far away. All right, so second period, class average of a 79, 1 point shy of first period, but I think we can catch them. I'm going to quickly go over some of the questions that were missed by a majority of students, right? That way we are using our time wisely. And the reason I do like to go over quizzes is because, you know, you will see these questions again. Just because you took that quiz doesn't mean you're free of that responsibility. All right, so here's a question where it looks like we had a good spread of answers. And that's all the same thing in my first period. Can you guys all see my screen okay? Okay. So water molecules are split by photolysis during the light-dependent reaction, supplying photosystem 2 with what? Okay. And I know it's kind of a rather challenging part of the light-dependent reactions, but when water is split, hydrogen and oxygen are just released, right? I mean, the hydrogen ions, they end up accumulating in the thylakoid lumen, and then the oxygen is a waste product, right? The plant wants to get that oxygen out as fast as possible. What was the photosystem really after? It was after the electrons, because The photosystems contain chlorophyll, and their job is to absorb photons. Their job is to absorb sunlight. And as the chlorophyll pigments absorb sunlight, they have these little electrons. They get so excited that they rip free off the molecule and they zip across that electron transport chain. But for photosynthesis to continue over and over and over again, that little electron that got yanked off of chlorophyll, it has to be replaced. And water kind of offers itself as a sacrifice, and the water molecule is ripped in half, and the photosystem steals those electrons to replace the ones that were lost of chlorophyll, to kind of recharge that system. And then since the electrons were ripped off of water, we end up with those little hydrogen protons, remember the little H pluses? And they kind of slowly start accumulating inside of the thylakoid. The oxygen, the plant doesn't want it. And we'll get to that here shortly. So the correct answer here were electrons, right? Water is split during photosynthesis to gain electrons, or for photosystem 2 to get those electrons. Okay, let's move on to this next one. Chlorophyll and other accessory pigments that absorb photons are responsible for what? So what is chlorophyll and the carotenoids? What are they really trying to do, right? Well, they're trying to absorb photons. Why? Why do we need photons? Well, the chlorophyll needs the photons to excite the electrons, right? It's the energy from the sun that yanks those electrons off of chlorophyll, that yanks the electrons off of the carotenoids, that powers the electron transport chain. So the correct answer is here, exciting electrons. The chlorophyll, these light-trapping pigments, they have nothing to do with carbon dioxide. And you have to remember, carbon dioxide isn't involved until we get to the light-independent reactions, right? Regulating temperature and pH. Regulating temperature and pH is probably going to be more so with the stomata, the little mouth openings, right? Letting water vapor out to cool the plant off, or the leaf cells releasing what are known as buffers to help control pH. So the best answer, what does chlorophyll do? It's all about absorbing sunlight, but what does it need the light for? It needs to excite electrons. Okay, looks good there, looking good. Looking good, looking good. And so this is what makes me happy when I look at a quiz. You think average of 79, that doesn't sound great, but it is good. And when I look, it's okay if as a class we miss a lot of the same questions. Because when I look at them, those are the hard questions. Those are questions that are not very intuitive and can be quite difficult to navigate through. What makes me nervous and scared is when people miss easy questions. Now, here we go. This one's pretty tough. What membrane-bound enzyme found along the thylakoid membrane utilizes the flow of protons? So anytime we see that H+, sometimes scientists just call them protons. It's also perfectly fine to call it a hydrogen ion, right? Because it's got a charge. From high concentration to lower concentrations during the light-dependent reactions to synthesize adenosine triphosphate. Wow, that's like a novel for a question. But really, at the end of the day, let me show you the most important parts. Here we go. What membrane-bound enzyme synthesizes adenosine triphosphate? You could answer that question with just that, right? So I know it's an enzyme. So what is it going to end with? ASE, right? What is this enzyme doing? It's synthesizing adenosine triphosphate. So what does it mean to synthesize or to synthesis? It means to make. What are we making? What is adenosine triphosphate? ATP. So which of those answers sounds like synthesizing adenosine triphosphate? This last one right here, ATP synthase. The photosystems, their job is to excite electrons by capturing photons. Chlorophyll is that go-to primary pigment. And then Rubisco is the name of my future dog. Rubisco is the enzyme that fixes carbon during the light independent reactions. So it's not going to be involved with the synthesis of ATP. In fact, it uses ATP. Now, how does ATP synthase actually work? Okay, so during this whole light dependent reaction, inside of the thylakoid, right, inside the thylakoid lumen, you end up accumulating lots and lots of H+. And they're all positively charged. And do positive charges want to be next to each other? Think about taking the magnet, right? And if you put both positive ends together, they repel each other, right? And so you have all these plus, all of this positivity, these positive ions trapped inside of this tiny space. And they're getting more and more crowded, more and more crowded. They want to get out. They want to get away from each other. But they can't just weasel their way to the thylakoid membrane. And so there is this membrane-bound protein called ATP synthase. And you can kind of think about it just like an opening. And that opening is specific only for hydrogen protons. Those protons can go right through that channel and escape and finally be free. And what's really neat is that protein takes advantage of that flow and uses that energy to synthesize ATP. Think about a dam. When you build a dam, the intention is to create a reservoir, right? To amass a large volume of water upstream. The bigger the reservoir, the more pressure that water exerts on that dam, right? There's a lot of potential energy in that reservoir. Well, when you want to make electricity, you just allow the water to flow through a constricted pipe. And since you've got this large volume, lots of pressure in a small pipe, that water flows very quickly through that pipe. And inside of that pipe, you'd have a little turbine that would spin as the water would go through and you generate electricity. That's exactly how ATP synthase works. You have this reservoir of protons or hydrogens. It builds up, and over time, it wants to get out, and ATP synthase uses that. It's really important that you guys wrap your mind around that enzyme because it's going to pop up again in cellular respiration. Okay, and maybe I'll figure out how to do a little demonstration to help clear that up. All right, let's see here. And if you guys see any of these questions that you want me to go over, just throw up your hand and be like, wait, talk about that one. Okay, here's the question where we got about half the class, and it was the same in first period. Why do plants release oxygen instead of storing it for later? Well, in the video about the light-independent reactions, I touch on this a little bit. Rubisco fixes carbon dioxide into a carbohydrate. But unfortunately, Rubisco can also have an interaction with oxygen. If plants accumulate oxygen, the oxygen will react with Rubisco, and the Rubisco enzyme won't produce a carbohydrate. And so that lowers the efficiency of photosynthesis. Oxygen is a very exciting, but also destructive molecule. It reacts with a lot of things. Think about it. I could take a piece of metal, dip it in water, and leave it outside, and it'll eventually turn to dust for no other reason than it's exposed to water and oxygen, right? And so there are a lot of things in our cells that they don't want to be near oxygen. Have you guys ever heard of antioxidants? Right? You're like, oh, I need to eat this food because it's high in antioxidants. What do you think it's preventing? Oxidation. Someone once told me the minute you take your first breath is the minute you start dying because you let oxygen into your body, right? And so Rubisco does not want oxygen present. And that's why plants release it, right? I mean, they release it into the air for us because they don't want it. They do need some of it, but they produce way more than they could ever need, right? And so the best answer is oxygen could interfere with the function of Rubisco. And the rest of these answers are just not really possible per se. If you look here, oxygen concentrations in the atmosphere are insufficient. Well, if the oxygen concentrations outside the plant were insufficient, then the plant would store the oxygen, wouldn't it? Right? Oxygen is a necessary reactant. Is oxygen a reactant of photosynthesis? No, it's a product, right? It's what plants produce. And the last one we obviously know is not true. Now, I'd say overall, 3 or 4 questions that, half the class missed is pretty good, right? And this stuff is tough. But cellular respiration is going to require just a little bit more out of you, okay? So I would make sure to allocate some serious time to prepare for that. And as I had said, with you guys being A-Day students, trying to get through as many of those videos as possible by Thursday would probably be in your best interest. Now, let's take a look at what you guys will be working on today, okay? You can see I've posted your 3.2 vocab for respiration. That'll be due on Wednesday, okay? That's something you want to try to get done as soon as possible. I don't know if you guys have really figured this out yet, but if you've ever taken, a Spanish class or German or French, or maybe English is your second language, the most important thing about learning a language is the vocabulary. And biology is nothing but vocabulary. I mean, think about when you read these questions, it's like reading a different language. So that's why I have you guys do a vocab assignment first, and that's why I have it due on Wednesday, okay? And then I've posted a separate little materials tab right here for the videos on respiration. And you can see there are quite a few of them. Now, I tried to break it up because respiration, aerobic respiration, is pretty complicated. So I made a video for each phase. That way you can like watch a video and kind of process it in your mind and be like, okay, I think I have it, right? But it's going to be really important to make sure to watch all of these. And I know some of you guys are not watching them because I know how many students I have and I can see how many views there are and they're not matching up. Okay. And that explains the 60s, the 30s, the 40s, right? And I can tell who watches the videos because you're the ones making 90s, 95s, and 100s on every quiz and every assignment. All right. So does anyone have any questions, whether you're at home or here in class? So someone at home asked, I noticed you never put in grades for my student syllabus or student info, right? And I'm going to, it's just going to be a green check mark in PowerSchool, right? I know somebody freaked out the other day when I returned them. They were like, I returned it. I know I did it. I was just returning it to check it off of my list of things that I had looked at, right? I'm not going to give you a grade for it. It's just a simple green check mark. So hopefully that answers your question. Does anyone else have any questions at home before I turn you loose on your vocabulary assignment? Alrighty then. Well, you guys go get started on your vocab for respiration. If you have any questions, send me an email or a message on the Remind. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Computer, charger, headphones.